I figured this out. Okay, Tammy, we are live and we are recording. So thank you again for joining me to answer some questions. You know, we have some questions from the audience actually, so I'm really happy about this. Funny enough, they usually come by email, which we welcome. You know, please communicate with us in whatever way suits you. So
yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway,
I just watched our interview again today just to kind of go, what did we talk about? And wow, we covered a lot of territory. It was awesome.
Oh, wow. We covered a lot of territory, but apparently not everything. So I still have some questions. But first of all, how is life in Canada?
Life is good. It's been really warm here. It's not too hot. It was for a while, but it's definitely okay now.
All right. Well, here we are having a thunderstorm approaching, so I hope there won't be any interference. Let's see. If you see things flying around behind me, that is just a thunderstorm, summer thunderstorm, nothing more.
Yeah, we'll be watching for Toto the dog, you know, the Wizard of Oz when the dog was, yeah.
Oh yeah, the Toto, exactly. And then Dorothy following.
In the bike.
All right, Tammy, let's get serious because our topic is really serious.
Ah, yes, okay.
Which doesn't mean that we have to go, you know, very serious about it. There needs to be sometimes some humor about conflict as well. Sometimes it's just ridiculous, you know, but sometimes it's very serious and sometimes it's very harmful. So because you are an expert, and now in all earnest, what are the biggest conflict situations that you as a conflict expert see in the workplace?
Oh, that's a good question. The biggest conflicts I have, I think, are when people get in their camps. So I actually thought we could, and maybe this will help. I thought I would go over the like kind of a micro model. Like I know that we had showcased the full model, but
yeah,
we have a reaction. And I want to talk about how we engage with conflict. So we have a emotional reaction, and then we have a vocal reaction. So we have our flight. Can you see this okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. So we have our flight or fight reaction when we have a conflict. So Isabella, where would you typically go when you have conflict? Do you tend to flight, fly away, or fight, go towards it?
I go towards it.
Yeah, and that's me too. This is where I tend to go. That's my camp part of it. And then we have a choice. Do we either engage and talk or do we get quiet? So where would you find yourself?
Oh, talking.
That's my quadrant as well. Maybe that's why we make such good friends. But
I think Tammy is because we are experts as well. So we have the tools to go into this quadrant.
That's true too. So really quickly with just that question, those two questions, you can find out how somebody engages with conflict on the intuitive kind of space. So some people will get flight and quiet. This is typically where we see the avoiders and accommodators. And I mentioned I don't like those terms. So I call these my pausers because what they need is space.
All right.
Right. So these people need to move away from it and kind of reconnect with their values and how they want to be seen and how they want to go forward. And so they can get really stuck here though with space because they don't get back into it. And so they get stuck in their camp. And this is what I meant. The biggest conflicts come when we get into our corner, like we turn away from it and we can't engage with others because we're stuck here. Those who are flighters but talk, I call these my askers. It's not really pretty and sexy, but
we roll with it, Tammy.
Yes, ask and understander. And these are typically the indirect passive aggressive terminology you would see in this camp. They will say things like, oh my gosh, look at the time. It's not really a question, but what they're really asking is, how much longer are you going to be here? Because I need to get back to work. Yeah. And so they're indirect, but they're trying to engage, but they're still kind of feeling tentative.
All right.
And then we have the speakers. That's the ones who are really comfortable talking about and trying to figure out solutions. So typically the direct, assertive, aggressive people are in this category. That's where you would find them. And then you have your fighters, but the quiet people, these are the doers. They don't need anything more than tell me what needs to be done and I'm going to go take care of it. But the conflict comes when we're in our camp. So if a strong doer is just doing, but they don't slow down to say, maybe they need some information so they understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, then we're not connecting.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. And I just want to say, because you and I, we're in the speakers camp.
Yeah.
And you said that the assertive types and aggressive types are there. So what is the difference between assertive and aggressive, you know?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, those are the old terms. I don't like those terms because you can be assertive and be a doer.
Yeah.
I think you can be assertive and be passive. Like you can be like, I'm not talking to you, I'm slamming doors, I'm walking away, and I'm being really staunch in my position. So this is just like the old terminology is avoiders, accommodators, indirect, passive aggressive, direct, assertive, and aggressive. That's what people can imagine and see in those camps. But you can be all of those in any of these. It really depends on how you engage, in my mind. There was something else I was going to say that, and I've lost it, but it'll come back.
All right. You usually do that.
I know. So I'm like, don't go too far down there. Just come back and stay here.
Okay, it will come back. All right. So, but let's maybe talk about the avoiders. I know you don't like that, your pausers, as you labeled them, because you know what? I have noticed that people who are comfortable in this camp, they can literally pitch camp there and make a glam camping experience there for years.
Yes. Yeah. And they will not get to resolution. Mm. So what I wanted to say is actually we are a blend of all of these, right? So there are definitely times where I am here in places where I'm uncomfortable. I don't know the people. I'm feeling a bit unsafe. Right. I'm here. Mm-hmm. And as a pauser, what I need is safety in order for me to come forward and share my ideas. And so part of understanding like that conversational integrity for the leaders that we're talking about is recognizing which camp you go to intuitively. Mm-hmm. And then you can quickly identify where's the other person. Mm. And knowing that you can be a blend of all of this, you can connect with yourself. Okay, where were the times that I was in that camp? What was I needing? What was I wanting? How did I feel? And then when you can connect with that internally, then you can start to find pathways to come inward and get outside of, like, you know, right now we're in our camps, we're not looking at each other, we're in our corner, like, we need to turn into each other and find a way to connect. And it really starts with identifying quickly where they're at and understanding what is it they need.
That's exactly the question. And I'm sure that many people will ask that. How do I recognize that? I mean, you and me, we are highly trained experts. We just have the tools. We can recognize it. We can label it very quickly, right? And so we can act accordingly. But people who don't have our training and expertise, how can they recognize it?
I think the first step is just to start. I mean, you know, and the other day, my husband and I were having a conversation, and it's just the simple thing about, I don't know, socks on the floor or something. It was just one of those household tasks that meant a lot to him. And for me, I'm like, no big deal. But I recognize that he was talking about the problem. And because I didn't want to start a fight, actually, I was over here. I was passive aggressive. I was making comments that I was hoping he would pick up on my hint, right? So we were in opposite camps and I didn't want to engage. He decided after he wasn't getting result, he just immediately come over here. He's like, okay, well, I'm just not going to talk about it. We'll move on, not bringing it up again. So very quickly, within like 5 minutes, we covered 3 camps, and then he just picks up my socks. So like we go through them so quickly, but to stop and recognize where am I at right now? Because I'm in conflict, I'm having this emotional reaction. Yeah. And I need to recognize where I am. And then once I recognize where I am, I can go, okay, I know where I am. I'm in my box. I'm in my container. Mm-hmm. How do I get to understand where they are is the next step. Mm-hmm. Recognize where they are. And then how do we turn towards each other?
Okay, so it comes with practice and self-awareness and awareness of the situation, right? So situational awareness and awareness of the other person as well, right?
Yeah, it's really quite fun sometimes. Just go out, like even in a non-threatening moment, take these 2 questions, fight or flight, talk or quiet, and start to see where people are at. Just observe others.
You're getting my thumbs up. I just need to, excavate.
It's so much fun. I love observing people, but you'll be like, oh, they're an asker. Oh, they're a doer. They're a pauser. They're a speaker, and start to identify it in others. And then you can start to identify it in self.
Cool. So guys, I hope you're taking the tips. But speaking of, it's like you and me, we work with high profile executives. And so very often, speaking of, you said that there was an observation in that quadrant when there's a passive aggressive area, right? How do you call it again? Is the asker. All right. And so I have a hierarchy of message. This is a model. And at the bottom of this is like a hint. Mm-hmm. And you said, there's a hint. Well, there are socks on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is very ineffective. I just want to stress that out. This is really ineffective. When you start from that low level of the hierarchy of the message, you will get nowhere. So first is the hint, then is an observation, then is the suggestion, and then there at the top of the hierarchy, there is a command. Pick up the socks.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but here, did you hear how that landed, right? So I
Yeah.
can see you twitched, right? And so that is my question to you, because leaders will go very often to that command tone. And then I think what will happen, and you know this very well because you work with leaders like that, they are labeled as abrasive, as bullies, right? Because they say, do it, pick up the socks.
Yeah.
Maybe not in that command, mother tone, but they can say it so that it lands and it can sound very aggressive, right? So how can leaders, oh, maybe the question is this, Tammy, how can leaders differentiate between aggressive tone and assertive? What's the difference?
Well, aggressive is name calling, shaming, humiliating. It's really trying to differentiate them as an other and you as the preferred. That's aggressive. Assertive is I language, right? So I noticed that the socks are on the floor, for example, just to stick with that example, right? And here's how it affects me. Or what were you thinking when you put them there? Or can you tell me why they're still there? Like, let me understand. Socks shouldn't be on the floor. They should be in your drawer, kind of thing. That's assertive. That's the big difference between the two.
Okay. Although I remember that the fallacy of should. I just got you, Tammy.
Did I say should? Yeah, they should be in your drawer.
Yeah, and you were just quoting your husband in all defense, So, but seriously, when we use statements like should, the socks should be in the drawer. That can also be passive aggressive, right?
I don't know if it's passive aggressive. It definitely highlights a rigid way of thinking as to what the right answer is.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, the fallacy of should keeps us stuck, right? So, well, maybe there's a potential that there's a reason the socks are on the floor, that they are in the living room, that they are in the car, wherever you might find them. When we stick in should, then we don't get to answers. Yeah, I know. Socks.
Household.
My socks truly are everywhere and it drives my husband crazy. But I mean, the same thing happens in the workplace. It's the pens, like, why are they all over your desk? It's the clutter. It's the timing to a meeting. It's the smallest things that create conflict.
And, so I call it implicit rules because we all have our idea of how the world should work. And
we judge everything by it.
Yeah, and they are implicit because they're ours and nobody else knows about them. And so this is one of those big C's of your communication model, right? Communication. You need to communicate to people what are your implicit roles. In my world, the socks should be in the sock drawer.
Should. Caught that.
But that's exactly it. That's exactly it. I'm doing it with intention because how we communicate implicit roles, right? And so also the viewers can catch that in the language. These are those telltales. Ooh, what am I dealing with right now? Somebody's communicating their implicit role to me. So that means that they believe the world should work like this. And then I can say, well, I hear you, but in my world, the socks can be literally anywhere.
That's right.
Can we talk about this? Can we find some platform here? Where should the socks be in the household that we share?
Yeah, exactly. And at what time frame, and what are the, where can those boundaries be flexed, and where do they have to be rigid? Like when company comes over, that sounds like a rigid time maybe for, appearance or, looks like I've done my job. That was what really important to my husband, is that he felt it reflected on his ability to maintain a house. That's huge. And me, they're just like, their socks on the floor. But translate that into the workplace. Your desk is messy. What does that reflect on you when you see that, and why does that become an issue for you?
Yeah. So I think, we need to really investigate that. And for this, we need those communication skills. And you call them, how do you call it again? Conversational integrity, right?
Yeah.
And conversational intelligence.
Yeah. Being curious is one of the main ones, right? So when you're in your camp and you recognize where you are, get curious as to how did they perceive it this way?
Yeah.
How did they get to be over in this camp? right? And can I go visit that camp and understand what's going on over there?
So what would you advise, let's just take an example. Let's say there's a young leader and he or she has a team member who doesn't pull their weight. And this leader needs to go and have a conversation about it. How should this person go about it? How should this person prepare themselves for this situation? Should they prepare themselves, or should they just walk in and say, hey, we have a thing to discuss here?
I think, first of all, where do you think that person is? If they're not pulling their weight, that's an assumption. And it may actually be true that they're not meeting deadlines and they're not contributing to the level in which you expected. So I'm curious. I always get curious first. What's the barrier? What's the threat? What's holding them back? Because maybe there is something that we just need to remove out of their pathway.
Or maybe there's something we just don't know, right?
Yeah, like maybe they have something external going on, that their spouse has just been diagnosed with cancer and now they're going through treatment, but they haven't shared that publicly with anybody, and it's really impacting them.
Yeah, so you're getting some love, Tammy. So Sven is saying, love that curiosity.
Oh, it's so huge. I mean, I got goosebumps just talking about that scenario, because when you get curious, you learn more, and then you can connect. When you have connection, you have trust, and then,
So he says, well, curiosity is the key, and that's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it so is. So understanding, if you think someone's not pulling their weight, I feel like they're probably here, maybe in this camp, but I'm not sure. I think that's just what I envision as someone who's getting quiet. They're not engaging, they're withdrawing. Maybe they don't share that they're having trouble. So I kind of think that they might be in this camp. I don't know. Can you think of them being in another camp? They're definitely not in a doer, because they're not getting shit done. If they were a speaker, they would probably be saying, hey, guys, I need some help.
Yeah.
If they were an asker, they might be hinting that they are struggling, but not really being direct about it. So I kind of feel like this might be where they're at. As a leader, I would recognize, okay, they're over here. I mean, obviously this is pretty high level again, but a pauser needs
and very space. Theoretical, but okay, we need to find some example.
Yeah, but that's fine. A pauser will take space. What they need to come forward is to feel safe. And being curious will help them to feel safe to expose what's going on, what their barrier is, what their challenge is, what their confusion is. And so if you're a speaker, the risk to being a speaker is that you don't create space, because you're talking, you have all the answers, you have the pathway, you have the solution. And so for a speaker, you need to be able to pause. You need to actually draw into this and take a moment and take a step back and leave quiet and leave space for somebody else to step in and share an idea. The doers, you just give them the details, and they just need direction. They'll figure out the details. Their risk is that they need to slow down. In order to come back to connection, they have to go, wait a second, maybe I should just give them my plan, give them some information so that they can feel comfortable.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of juggle. And I think, is Jacqueline Whitmore, she talked about being a chameleon here in the summit. And I think it's a little bit like being a chameleon in the communication types, right? You need to really adapt to your environment, and especially as a leader, you really need to know your people, and you need to always adapt your communication to the audience, right?
Yes. I think my greatest training ground was nursing. I mean, every patient's needs were different. Their conditions were different. Their diagnosis was different. Their treatment was different. Their barriers were different. I think back to this lady who she was very vocal about how crappy the food was, how we always interrupted her, how we never helped her. But you know what? Her actual actions were completely opposite of what she said she wanted, which was to get the H out of the hospital. But she wasn't going to physio. She wasn't giving her, she wasn't taking the turns, so she wasn't going to get bed sores and all that kind of stuff. I'm a strong speaker. I had to come in and get curious with her, because what I wanted to do was say, hey, lady, come on, this is what you want. This is what you're doing. What the heck?
Yeah.
But I had to get curious first, and I had to share my observation. So strong speaker. I had to leave space for her to fill in the gaps so I could understand what was the barrier for her actually doing the things to get where she wanted to go. But by asking her that, she shared with me, well, I get more attention here than I get at home. So despite the fact that she was miserable with everything we tried to do with her and for her, that was more attention than she got at home. That was where the true healing started, because her husband was sitting right there, and his mouth dropped to the floor. because he was dedicated. He came up every day. He read to her. This was the first time he was hearing that she was feeling dissonance in their relationship.
Mhm.
Once we get, I mean, it's not even nursing, but that context was blocking her from doing the things she needed to do to go home. Once we heard that, we could then put a plan together.
And this is great because I think this is the human connection.
Mm-hmm.
She needed the human connection, which she was not getting at home, but she was getting with you guys. And even though the dynamic was not very constructive, she was still getting what she needed.
Yeah.
And I think you stressed that in your interview, that connection is the number one thing that we really need to be effective as leaders.
Yeah, because I could have come in there like typical, leader. And my definition of leader is anybody who is in a position to better the next person's life or to elevate their practice or their skill set. You don't need a formal title for this. Thank you. Because I could have gone in there, rolled up my sleeves. I'm the nurse. You need to do what we tell you to do. And that's not going to get anywhere. It never does. And so I had to pause my own ego, pause my own belief of what she needed to do in order to understand where she was to get her moving where she needed to go.
Mm-hmm. Not only ego, I think also arrogance, right? Because there are many people who have that authority, right? That position of power, like you were the nurse, right? So you knew what was the right thing to do, and you could have went there and told her.
Yeah.
But it's the same with leaders in corporate, very often they think that they have that right to be
position power.
Position power, exactly.
Yeah, you want expert power. You want referent power. You position power is inherent by your name and your title. But just because you have it doesn't mean anyone's going to listen. Like I'd have gone in as the nurse. I had position power. She'd have blown me off and told me that I was the worst nurse ever. Get me another one, right? Because I wouldn't have been able to influence a change. I needed to become as an expert power and get the referent power from her, that she liked me, trusted me, knows me.
Wow. It's really tough, isn't it? Having those skills to build trust and connection with people. And it takes time, huh?
I don't know if it's so much tough as I think it is a commitment. I mean, I walk the line every day as a nurse, 8 patients a day, different. I mean, every moment changed. I think because of the values. So we talked about this in our interview, that when you know what the values are that you want to lead your life by, connection, caring, curiosity, when I led by those, I don't think I had a tough moment. I had a lot of success and prideful moments. I loved difficult patients because I knew I could connect with them and figure out what the heck was going on with them to move them forward.
You were the
It was just a commitment.
Did you see that show, Dr. House?
Oh, yeah.
You were like the nursing Dr. House. The worst cases for Tammy.
I loved them. I'd be like, sign me up, I'll take them.
Yeah.
Because I would hear so many times my colleagues would be like, well, you can't be in pain. I just gave you medications. I'm like, but they're in pain. You got to hear where they're at and figure out what they need. You don't get to judge and jury. You have to be like on the journey with them. It is my greatest honor.
Here's the big one. You cannot judge.
Yeah. We love it. Don't get me wrong. I judge all the time. But I have to learn how to set them aside.
It's human nature to judge. I agree with you. But if you want to be an effective leader of people, you need to learn to leave that out. As Dr. Marsha Reynolds, she said it very clearly in her interview. You need to catch the judgment. You catch that moment. You catch the thought. And it comes with self-awareness.
Yeah.
And then release it before you come back into the conversation. Yeah. And this is, it's like I say that I have a black belt in coaching, and Marsha Reynolds and people like her, they're like 7th Dan or something like this. It takes so much skill and self-awareness and practice.
Yeah, it's a choice though. It is a choice. Just like we choose how we feel, we choose how we engage with people. I wholeheartedly believe that. We have reactions, yes, but when you recognize you're in a reaction and you're in a camp, then you have a choice as to what you're going to do with it.
I think it comes a little bit with maturity and a little bit
coaching.
Sorry?
And coaching, having somebody highlight those blind spots for you, because I got blind spots. I'm going to tell you.
Yes. Everybody does. Everybody does. And these people who think they don't, hello, reality check people. You do as well.
Yeah, even, you and I, with the knowledge we have and the experience we have, we still have blind spots because we haven't been exposed to every situation. We don't know how we're going to react and interact. And there is no perfect communicator.
No, but that's why, Tammy, you and I, we have coaches. we are in constant training and supervision, right? And we work with master coaches so that they can give us feedback and say, I wonder if you've noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
And
often,
we're okay
like,
I was gonna say, and we're okay to have blind spots exposed to us. They still are uncomfortable. They are not pleasant. I've been called a racist once when I was teaching. I had 4 students call me a racist, and I was like, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing to earn that. But if you're willing to explore that with me, I want to know what I'm doing, because this is like hard on me.
yeah.
And they were willing to come to the table and have a conversation with me. And what they saw was a behavior which I just simply handed papers back. And because theirs were together, that alone was enough for them to make them feel like I was singling them out. And yet that's how they were handed in. That's how I handed them back. But without that discussion, that tension, that rift would have continued on.
Yeah.
And so I was so grateful that they were willing to come to the table and be curious with me so we could explore each other's actions, behaviors, words.
And it's such an important moment that I just got there. You opened that floor for a discussion and for conflict resolution really early in the stage of the conflict, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we also talked about this in the interview, right? That some people don't do that. They wait, they hope, they pray to God that the conflict is going to resolve itself, that people are going to improve, change, yeah. And and literally they can be there for years in those situations, which is not funny. It's actually tragic. So that's why I think it's so important to talk about these skills, because these are skills, right? Mm-hmm. Just skills. Like you and I, we were not born advanced communication specialists, right? We learned for years.
There's a really simple, and I didn't talk about this in the interview. I don't know how much time you set aside for the live. And if there's questions, I'd love to answer them.
I thought, yeah, okay.
You cut me off whenever. There's a real simple 5-step process I teach people because it's scary, right? So the first thing is, what's your intention? Right? So for me, my intention is always connection. I don't like it when people are unhappy with me. I don't like it when I've hurt them. I want to understand it. So connection is my intention. And then you go into planning. How am I going to get there? What do I need to think about? Those kind of things, which is fairly detailed. And this is part of the planning, by the way. This is one of the things I teach about planning is, where are you and where are they? And how can we then get to understanding each other? Then the third thing is the gut check, because we do so much intention and planning, and then we don't actually do it because we get fearful, we have worries, we have doubts. And so that gut check is so important to get realigned back with, what is my value? If this is aligned with caring, connection, curiosity, then I know I'm coming from a really good place. And I need to just recenter there before I do the darn thing. That's the 4th step. And then the 5th one is to reflect. What went well? What didn't go well? What would I change? Because each person, each situation is unique.
Wow, Tammy, half an hour is almost gone. I don't know how we do it. We always do it.
All right, let's make sure I answer any questions that have come up, or if there's.
I'm just checking, So there was a question whether conflict is always a bad thing.
No. I think conflict is a good thing. It shows you areas where you need to grow.
All right, that was quick and short.
Mm-hmm.
So the question was, what are some bullying behaviors that leaders might confuse with being decisive?
With being decisive? Oh, well, bullying behaviors are anything that cause emotional harm. So if you're decisive, you're making quick decisions. So you might be in the doer camp if you're decisive. Bring me the problem, I got the answer. And that abruptness, not giving space, could be interpreted as being dismissed, devalued, not respected. That's a personal interpretation that you need to explore and understand where they are, because these guys need to slow down, right? So that might just be an understanding of how they work.
But I think, also, Tammy, and Carola says, I could listen to you two for hours. We can continue for hours, don't challenge us.
Yeah, maybe we should do our own podcast. This might be the beginning of something new.
Hey,
the Conversation Girls. I love it.
Yeah, cool. So what I was going to say before I lose my thought is that I think being decisive, what leaders very often label as decisive or authoritative, in language can sound like barking orders. And I think they should also check in with the language, right? Not only the tone of the voice or how quickly they speak, but just the language itself, the choices that they make.
Yeah, I mean, leaders have to make decisions. There's no doubt about that. The buck stops with somebody, and that's part of the position power. I think there's a real move to go towards flat hierarchies. I don't know if that's really possible because somebody on the team needs to be making a decision. Yes, we can all contribute, but somebody has to have that responsibility. Okay, guys, I guess this is where we're going. Otherwise, you'll forever be in discussion mode.
Yeah, fair and square.
Yeah. So leaders do need to make a decision. And sometimes when they communicate it, it will come across, depending on what your style is in conflict, how you hear it. I mean, we can all say, I'm sorry, or I'm sorry, or holy crap, I'm sorry. Like it's how it lands based on how you interact with conflict that makes the difference. Impact is what we measure. Intent is what we can influence.
And with this, I have to leave you because it's half an hour Q&A, but maybe, Tammy, you just came up with a brilliant idea. Maybe we can have our own podcast.
I think we totally can. I think it'd be an awesome idea.
It would be awesome. And then people could join us for hours and hours and hours. If there are any other questions, then I will pass them to you.
Sounds good.
And in the meantime, thank you so much, Tammy, for all the time that you've given us. Here, somebody says something. Thank you very much. Looking forward to your podcast. We have
there we have. There's the endorsement.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And I'm sending you a big hug, and continue with your day in Canada. Here, there's an evening. So we're slowly wrapping up. Tomorrow's another day on the summit. So thank you, Tammy. And
you're welcome.
All the best to you.
I love you too, girl.
Bye.
Bye.